Welcome, fellow your pothead Joe Pop Putty Man here, and today we'll be reviewing the new Masters of the Universe Revelations created by Kevin Smith on Netflix. Now, I will be doing this extra special, so if at any point you do enjoy this video, then please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, hitting that notification bell will notify you whenever I'm live, as well as when a new video drops. Now, before I go into my review, I want to tell you why all this is so special to me. So special that I pre-recorded this part of the video, just so I can have it ready for my review. So, if you're just interested in the review, skip to the time step at the bottom of the screen. Now, I will also include chapters for this review, and understand that everything will be spoiler-free until the end, where I will go into any Easter eggs I find. But I will give you warning. Now, on to the video. The year was 1983, and I was 3 years old. I know at this point in my life, I was too small to remember things vividly, and too small to understand dates. And asking my parents about dates has turned up a little pointless, since when you get older, some old memories fade. But for me, when it comes to cartoons and toys, I remember things. You never forget what you love. Then around 1984 and 1985 came around, and something had been established as being the most popular cartoon and toy line for little boys, called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I remember getting up on Saturday morning excited to watch the cartoon and not knowing the show had been established itself years prior. But apparently my mother does state that the cartoon drew me in so much as a kid that I would dart to the TV to see the cartoon with my action figures in hand, ready to imitate the show's characters. She stated I would get everything together with a bowl of cereal, ready to set out on adventures with He-Man and the rest of the Masters of the Universe. And these toys would surround me on the living room floor. But there was an advertisement that would pop on TV, and I would beg my mom and dad for it. That commercial was for Castle Grayskull.
What do we have here?
It's Castle Grayskull.
And it's mine.
Not so fast, Beastman. He-Man!
You can pit He-Man against Beastman, playing for the power of Castle Grayskull. You have to put the castle together.
Beastman's escaping.
The throne, Dad. Dad, you saved the castle.
Castle Grayskull from the Masters of the Universe collection. He-Man and Beastman, each sold separately, from Mattel.
Now, this was the end-all, beat-all playsets. You would literally see it in the intro song of the cartoon, and it was a crucial part of the show. Every kid wanted it, and a lot of kids got it. I unfortunately did not have it, and apparently this upset me every time I saw the commercial, according to my mom. And Christmas was soon, so hopefully I would get it. Now, keep in mind that during all this, I was also obsessed with my dad's Atari console. My mom would invest a lot into my games for me, and she thought it was something I wanted. And this rang true. But who knew that how much I truly loved video games? Putty Man was pretty much a geek to a lot of stuff, and this was nurtured a lot in the 80s, with so many things being targeted towards kids. So, when Christmas of 1985 came around, I was eager to open up my Christmas presents to find a Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as NES. Okay, so I know I set up for a big surprise, but this was a big deal for me. I was excited, but you know how kids are. I was all about my NES, and I mean all about my NES. Before this, my dad had all the Atari consoles his own, and I wanted my own. And I finally had it, and it consumed my life. Unfortunately, He-Man took a nap for a bit until the cartoon rolled around again the next Saturday, or at least I think the next Saturday. Who knows? Now, for those unaware, my birthday is January 28th, which is pretty much a month after Christmas. And at times, my birthday may not be a big deal because Christmas just happened and I want to get all my major presents there, which is understandable. That was until I was sat down on the kitchen floor at my grandma's house and given a gigantic box wrapped in newspaper. Understand, this was the birthday I was turning 5 years old, and this box was bigger than the box my NES came in. Now, birthdays are always exciting, and this one was no exception, but who knew this would be the first birthday that even to this day I do not forget, because it was the day I finally got my Castle Grayskull. In all its glory, I finally had it. I wanted it set up, I was set up then and there, but I had to wait until we got home, and even had to wait overnight so my dad can put it together. My mother told me that the other thing she does remember was him cussing up a storm putting this thing together as I finally went to bed. Keep in mind, I was excited to go to sleep. To open up, play with it. I had my own NES console and Castle Grayskull. I was happy. Now, as the years passed, my obsession with cartoons and action figures grew just as much as my love for video games. He-Man was the first love, then came G.I. Joe, then came Star Wars, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then X-Men. Now, of course, these were the main things I loved. Sprinkled in between was Transformers, Thundercats, Ghostbusters, Batman, and many more that I was having battles between Thundercats and Ghostbusters and He-Man just as a whole. All the figures were similar in size and made it great for playing together. Unfortunately, Star Wars and G.I. Joe had their own little world, literally, because the figures on both of those toy lines, were similar in size, but now, honestly, I'm going on a tangent. Let's continue. Now, this sums up why I feel the new Master Universe Revelation holds dear to me. As I got older and puberty began to set in, I was more focused on video games, movies, and comic books. Still liking action figures, but not as much. It was around 1995 when I discovered something else. You see, me and my mom had just left my dad, and to keep things entertaining, we would rent movies and video games at a local store every weekend. One weekend, we both came upon a movie about Clerks. Now, I don't know if I rented it or if my mom did, but at first I didn't know what to think of it. Not until I saw the characters Jay and Silent Bob. Now remember, when this movie came out, I was 15, and these two seemed really cool to me. It was Beavis and Butthead age of my time, and the duo format worked for me, so I was a fan. But what truly took hold of me was a movie that had my hero Stan Lee on the cover of the movie, and that movie is called Mallrats. Honestly, I didn't even realize that this was the same movie that had Jay and Silent Bob from Clerks in it. Remember, at the time, the internet just came out literally, so I had no idea what Kevin was making. Mallrats made me a fan of Kevin Smith to this day and forever. So, now that I put you through all of this, I want to explain a few things. See, when I was growing up, my mother was obsessed with soap operas. And whenever I was sick, I would stay home, and one of her favorite soap operas was called All My Children. And it had a female in there that apparently I crushed on, and I do remember crushing on her. That character was played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. And later, Sarah Michelle Gellar, which was on that show, ended up becoming the star of a show called Buffy. So when I found out that she would be playing Teela in this new Master Universe Revelations, I was excited. Kevin Smith, the guy I wanted to be best friends with, Sarah Michelle Gellar, the girl I was crushing on, and Masters of the Universe, the show I obsessed on. This was my heaven. But now I have a concern, because this was said by Sarah Michelle Gellar. She states, "There was no way into that story for me growing up because all of the women were afterthought characters. They didn't hold the power, and the storylines weren't about them. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer expressed this with Entertainment Weekly. Characters like Evelyn, a sorcerer villainess, were cool, but even she was not always there," she explained. Teela, allied to Prince Adam, wasn't even on the secret that her best friend was secretly the all-powerful hero of Eternia known as He-Man. She was in every episode and not even really part of the Journey story then. Gellar then states Master of the Universe Revelation, the new sequel series to hit the original cartoon, comes out this next Friday and is completely different. Now, all of this is understandable because the show was called, and I quote, He-Man and the Master Universe. But I remember distinctly being episodes revolving around Teela and Evelyn that had nothing to do with He-Man, or he was a side character, outside of maybe a fight or two. But at the same time, if I told people that Powerpuff Girls or Rainbow Bright needs to appeal to boys, I would be canceled for wanting to change something so special to little girls. Listen, I want to state this. I embraced this show as Teela's show, even before I've actually seen it. I'm a fanboy that loved Teela growing up, and of course I want to see more. If you're a fanboy and don't understand why Teela is the focal point, then just remember that the 80s show was called He-Man and the Master Universe, and this one is called Masters of the Universe Revelation, so I want them to embrace Teela. But Sarah Michelle Gellar, please remember that She-Ra, Rainbow Bright, and many other slew of cartoons targeted towards little girls existed at that time. I would never change those in any way. They are a part of pop culture history that was loved just as much as the show Buffy, which I loved, and it was your show. Please take time to realize that Masters of the Universe was and is for everyone, and don't belittle the cartoon that made me happy. When my cousin Nicole grew up loving Rainbow Bright, I would never want to belittle the show because it didn't have male characters to appeal to me. That's not what's going on here. So, with that being all said, I'm excited to finally review the Masters of the Universe Revelations, and honestly, give my opinion as a fanboy of everything I've loved about the show, including He-Man, Man-at-Arms, Skeletor, and Teela. And now, future me, what do you think? Well, Pastel, thank you for explaining all that and why I am a fanboy for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and why I'm a fanboy for Masters of the Universe Revelation, because I loved it. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be a spoiler-free section. This review is going to be spoiler-free. I will go deep into Easter eggs, and if you've already seen the length of this video already, because I can guarantee you, even though I haven't shot the Easter egg part of this section, by the notes I've made, it's big. It's big. As a fanboy, I love what they did with this series. Now, a lot of people are going to be mad based on some situations if you're a fanboy. If you're not a fanboy of He-Man and the Master Universe, then I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy this. There's happy parts, there's sad parts, there's parts that get you pumping, but then there's parts, honestly, if you don't know the lore of He-Man and the Master Universe, then, or I'll just say in the Master Universe in general, then you may be lost. But that's what my Easter egg part is for, explaining all that information. And boy, do I have a lot, pictures and everything. And I still got to get more pictures for the ending Easter egg. But I'm going to be going through everything now when it comes to Easter eggs, so on and so forth. But I want to tell you what my final verdict on this is. And to be very honest with you, I was thoroughly surprised on how good this was. I was kind of worried based on Sarah Michelle Gellar's comments, if you saw my first part, and if you didn't, that's fine. But there were some negative results or thoughts on the original series. And so I was worried about where this was going to be going, and now I'm thoroughly happy what they've done. Fanboys are probably going to be mad, only because of several situations I don't want to talk about here. But then at the same time, fanboys, you should be excited, because if you really know the background of Masters of the Universe when it comes to the action figures, concept art, things of that nature, you're gonna be happy. So, with that being said, my final verdict, and this is gonna cause controversy for sure, is 9 out of 10. I loved this. Mark Hamill as a Skeletor was amazing. Sarah Michelle Gellar's Teela was good. But honestly, Kevin Smith's writing is what made this show phenomenal and amazing in my eyes. It's to the point where I really am excited to just jump into Easter eggs, and I think this is going to be a full breakdown video, and with several parts about me explaining why I'm a fan, the review, and the breakdown. So this is going to be a fanfare when it comes to this episode. So buckle up, guys. That's the only thing I'm going to say, is buckle up for this. With that being said, this is your spoiler alert, guys. I'm going to Easter egg territory. I'm too excited about this to talk about all the little bits and pieces, and to talk about the things that might have altered my emotions when it comes to this new Masters of the Universe Revelation. So, with that being said, again, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. And let's get into it. You watched the episode, right? You're ready for spoilers. Well, I'm ready to dish them out. And honestly, as we go through, you're going to see that there's a lot of Easter eggs down the road. But honestly, the first and last episode probably gave the most Easter eggs of all, and the best ones of all. So, first and foremost, this does continue off the old show, but what it has done, kind of like the original Ninja Turtles movie back in the 90s, they've combined the cartoon and comic books that you get with the action figures together. So, if you're not familiar, the original action figures would come with a little comic book, and they would explain the story of He-Man and Skeletor, and why the accessories and things of that nature that you get with the action figures come together. quite literally. And then the cartoon decided to change things up and make things different. So I like that they're combining the cartoon and the comic books together. There's a lot of things you may not be aware of, so I can't wait to get into that once we get to those parts. And honestly, the first episode explained it all once they did the ending of it, which I'll explain here in this Easter egg. So, with that being said, the first thing we do is start off with the first scene, which shows two bad guys being that were tied up by a horse type character. Those two characters are Clawful and Spikor. Now, Clawful actually was an action figure that had a spring action claw, and then the Spikor figure actually had spikes all over him, but he also had like a trident that popped out of his arm that extended. It actually was really broken when I was a kid. The arm or the trident would stick out, but wouldn't go back in if you had his arm to his side. It would always pop down. But anyway, so it's nice to see, deep cut figures like that in the original scene. And then for the next Easter egg, we have of course, King Randor and Queen Marlena. Now, I wouldn't call these really Easter eggs since we know these characters from the old cartoon, and the same thing with what we're going to be getting into when it comes to a lot of these other characters that are the main characters. But I wanted to go through, show the original action figures like you see here with King Randor. There was not a Queen Marlena figure, but there was a King Randor figure. And you're going to notice that a lot of the male figures and even the female figures were all on the same mold. So all the characters that were the male characters were in the same mold, which you saw with Clawful, Spikor, and King Randor now. And that was the same way with the female characters, which we'll get to later when it comes to Teela and Evil Lyn. Okay, next we see under the table is Cringer, and of course Cringer does turn into Battle Cat in the original cartoon, the comics, and even in the action figure series. As you can see here, the Cringer figure had the attachments to turn him into Battle Cat. So it's awesome to see Battle Cat Cringer in this opening scene, which did lead to who we thought was He-Man at the beginning. Next we see Man-at-Arms. Now, Man-at-Arms was another major character in the cartoon, and the comic, of course. And Man-at-Arms, again, used the same mold as the He-Man figure, so I won't get into that. There's only a few characters that had their own mold as far as the females, but we're going to get into one character that actually had his own Pacific mold, just because, specific mold that basically was used. So, then, of course, we have Teela showing up here. Now, of course, Teela is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, and if you saw the first part of my video, you know there was controversy towards that. And then, of course, between Man-at-Arms, or in the middle between Man-at-Arms and Teela, pops up Orko. And it's really cool that they modified Orko to look really entertaining-wise, very magical, I should say. So then, of course, we find out that we see He-Man here with the Sorceress. And, of course, if you're looking here, you see Stridor. Stridor was a robotic horse figure that the joints on the legs were just like on the figures, where there was no joints at all when it came to a lot of these figures. And then we do find out later that it is Night Stalker, but once we get to that, we'll bring it up, which also brings up Faker as well. But again, when we get to those scenes, I'll show them. Next, you see Zor in the air, and this is the Sorceress's bird, which did give us signs that when she comes down, boom, we now have the Sorceress. So, Zor was a separate action figure that you could buy to use with the Sorceress, and of course, the Sorceress used the same mold of both Teela and Evil Lyn. So the way they did it back then was they used the same mold for all action figures, but modified the head and accessories or anything like the arms that they needed to do. Then, of course, we do finally see, of course, the Sorceress, and then we see Skeletor. Skeletor appears, and we find out that He-Man is actually not the He-Man we see. Now, if you remember, Skeletor, again, was using the same mold as He-Man, and we do have the figure showing right here, so it's pretty self-explanatory. If you know who He-Man is, you know who Skeletor is. He's the Joker to his Batman. Now we have Prince Adam. Now, if you're not aware and you're watching this without watching the show, that's a little odd, but Prince Adam transforms into He-Man, And we do see Prince Adam here, which also reveals to us that the He-Man we saw earlier is fake. And that's where we go into Faker. Faker is, well, they changed Faker. Faker is bald in this, more robotic. And he was kind of the same way in the old cartoon, but he was blue, just like he's blue here, but he looked exactly like He-Man. It's just blue with brown hair. That was who Faker became. And of course, you can see the figure right here. Then, of course, we have Evil Lynn. Evil Lynn is, again, using the same mold that the Sorceress and, of course, Teela used. And we do finally see Evil Lynn in this episode. Now, as we continue, we're going to start also seeing vehicles combined. So I'm going to combine both things to show you stuff. So, for example, we have Beastman finally showing up right here in a Bashasaurus. And also, you see there's a land shark beside him as well. I will show a picture of both Beastman and the Bashasaurus separately. And, of course, now you see Land Shark as well. Then, of course, we finally get a full view of Castle Grayskull. It is shown earlier in the episode, but I wanted to make sure to get a full view. And, of course, it looks a lot like the original Castle Grayskull from the figures. So that's pretty awesome. Next, and this is, again, we're at now Easter Egg 16 and still in episode 1. Easter Egg 16 is actually of Triclops, which was the one that would spin his eyes to show different expressions. Now, at first, I was like, that looks like a sky sled. I've seen that before. But then, upon further investigation, it's called a war sled, and it's for this new cartoon. Now, we do see the sky sleds later on, driven by Man-at-Arms, and the sky sleds actually attached to the Ram vehicle, to Ram Man's vehicle, which I'm hoping in the new cartoon, part 2, we get Ram Man finally. But yeah, so that means that we do get the Sky Sled here, as well as the new version called the War Sled. Next, we have the Hover Robots. Now, the Hover Robots are actually in the original cartoon, which I will show a picture right here. We see one Hover Robot that's crushed, and then the other half right before it gets crushed. It was hard for me to get a quick image because Clamp Champ, which we'll get into in just a second, is actually crushing the Hover Robots, so we only get them briefly. They didn't make well, they did eventually make action figures of these, but in the original line of Master Universe, they did not make Hover Robots. And you're going to see a lot of characters that they didn't make in the original line here, but I will explain where they come from. But Hover Robots was in the original cartoon, just wasn't in the original line of action figures. And then, of course, next we do see a shot here with Teela, and on the left of Teela we have Fisto, and on the right, of course, there is Clampjamp that I just talked about that destroyed that Hover Robot. So it is cool to see deep cuts again of characters that may not have gotten as much love in the cartoon or even the action figure form, even though they did get action figures that, you know, they may not have been as loved in the cartoons. Next, we have Trapjaw, and Trapjaw was actually one of my favorite figures growing up. He's actually in a Roton, but Trapjaw's mouth would open and close because he's Trapjaw. And so it's cool to see Trapjaw in a Roton, which was, again, my other favorite vehicle. It was a vehicle that I remember actually opening. I got it as an Easter present. And I remember opening it, and it's a vehicle, when you roll it on the ground, the spikes or the treads or the saw blades, whatever you want to call on the side, spin around the vehicle with the action figure in the middle. So the Roton was one of my favorite vehicles, and of course Trapjaw was one of my favorite action figures. So to see him in the Roton in the beginning is pretty awesome. Okay, now, as I stated earlier, this is actually a better picture of Beastman and the Bashasaurus. Now, the Bashasaurus is actually a vehicle that has a big boulder on it, and we do see that He-Man ends up stopping the boulder. And that's pretty cool here. Next, we see Night Stalker. Now, if you remember, Night Stalker was actually Strider earlier, the horse. And it is confirmed that Faker was using Strider to turn it into Night Stalker, which He-Man is always on Battle Cat anyway. So, but I see why they did the deep cut. It was the best way of showing Strider and Night Stalker. Which is kind of like what they did with Panther, since Panther wasn't actually shown in this episode, which is Skeletor's. It's basically Skeletor's tiger to He-Man's Battle Cat kind of situation. Next, we finally see Moss Man, and Moss Man actually looks different here, but we do see later in the episode he looks more like the action figure. But of course, you see, again, as I'm going through this, I'm showing you each of the action figures in the original line, but whenever there's not an action figure, I will get into it. But these are just basically the figures that are deep cuts of action figures, aka characters from the original line. Now we have the key to the Heart of Wisdom. Now, in this, it's actually inside Castle Grayskull, but in the original toy line, it was actually at the drawbridge. So here was the thing. They wanted you to buy Castle Grayskull and then buy both He-Man and Skeletor, because they would both have half of the sword, combine the swords, use it as a key to open up Castle Grayskull, and be the master of the universe. That's essentially what the old toys were about. But then they changed it and made it one sword, and then Skeletor ended up just having a staff. But in the original toy line, Skeletor actually got a sword just like He-Man, as you see right here. The only thing that was different was Skeletor got a staff, while He-Man got a battle axe. So to see that they're now slowly putting in the comic book stories that you got with the original figures, and the concept of what the toys were used for is amazing. But instead of it opening up Castle Grayskull in this situation, it opens up the magic of the Heart of Wisdom, which then transforms the Castle Grayskull into the Hall of Wisdom. Now, understand, the Hall of Wisdom actually did appear in one of the cartoons. It appeared in the 2002 He-Man and the Master Universe cartoon. And again, it holds all magic that created Eternia and all of its existence. And of course, then we finally see in this episode the Sword of Power divides into two separate swords, just like how they did with the original toy line. So, big ups to Kevin Smith for thinking, hey, let's go ahead and take the old story those came from the action figures and combine it with the cartoon and explain why there was always one sword. Now it's explained why it is always one sword and why he becomes He-Man, and when they separate, it changes things. That's pretty awesome. Which now means we end the Easter eggs for episode 1 called The Power of Grayskull, and now we get into the storyline where there is no He-Man and it's just Teela, which also means that the Easter eggs are a little more slim, but I feel a lot more special as we get into it. So, let's get into episode 2 Easter eggs. Now we get into episode 2 Easter eggs and so on. And once we got to episode 2 Easter eggs, it changed the format. Of course, He-Man's no longer here. And now this is Teela's story, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But this episode's called The Poison Chalice. And the first Easter egg we have here is for Stinkor. Now, I love how Teela talks about how the area stinks, so on and so forth. And that rings true to the action figure. So if you look at the action figure, it looks like a skunk, and it smelled like a skunk. Literally, this action figure stunk. It was basically they used some kind of fragrance on it, and it was a horribly smelling figure. Literally, a horribly smelling figure. And understand, you're gonna find a common theme when it comes to a lot of the action figures where they have their own abilities. And that's actually going to be the same thing for this episode, because we're going to see another character that has its own action feature. Next Easter egg is for Lieutenant Andra. Now, this is a friend of Teela's, but this character never appeared in the cartoon. She actually appeared in the original Master Universe comic book made by Star Comics. She was actually a former friend of Teela, having both of them served in the Academy days together. Don't think that's something they're targeting here, though. I think they're just making them friends after He-Man's gone. So I think basically Andra's story that came from the comic books had been changed just for this series. Next we have Magistra, which again, no, I didn't know this already, but she actually does we do find out that she's evil in disguise. The reason that Teela knows is because she's already done this in the cartoon. In the old cartoon, she does turn into Magistra to entertain the king, and to infiltrate Castle Grayskull. Now, but in the old cartoon, she's a younger version with white hair, while in this cartoon, they have her as an old woman. Next, we finally get a visual of Snake Mountain. And again, the way they did all the playsets and areas in this show to match the playsets is amazing. Again, bravo for the artists, the creative team that designed this and knew exactly what they were looking for. Okay, next we have Whiplash. Whiplash was a reptilian, beast-looking kind of character. I say reptilian because he's green. But Whiplash had an ability where you can actually just basically spin his body and whip his tail around. And again, like I told you earlier with Stinkor and a lot of the other figures, like Clawful and everything, they all had their own abilities where they would have spring action abilities, things of that nature, where there wasn't articulation to figures, not until later on down the road as they made figures for the 2002 series. But they did always have some kind of action to make playing with the action figures fun. So that was what Whiplash allowed you to do. You'd be able to whip the tail around. Okay, next we have Blast Attack. Now, they don't actually call Blast Attack by name in this episode, so this is going to be a deep cut, something that people don't know. So Blast Attack, again, was one of those figures that was made to explode. The figure didn't actually explode itself, realistically, so... and I don't remember if it actually would explode as far as come apart. I don't think it did. But again, yeah, Blast Attack was a pretty cool figure, but not anything I would get cheerful about. I just remember. Alright, so that goes for the episode 2 Easter eggs. Now we're going to go into episode 3 Easter eggs, which basically just had 2 new characters. And in this episode, it's called The Most Dangerous Man in Eternia, and they're helping the Sorceress combine the 2 swords by Rabada reforging it. Of course, that doesn't happen in this episode, but that's what the plan is. And of course, we first see Merman. Merman is like a mer person, basically. And the action figure rang true to its look and everything. So even in this show, he pretty much looks like the original Merman. Next, we have Roboto. Now, Roboto is actually different as far as the figures. You don't see the gears in this cartoon like they did in the old one. But the original action figure had gears to where whenever you would rotate the gears, his mouth and head would turn, and you'd see his mouth or the grill piece actually bounce up and down, and the gears spin in his chest. So Roboto was a very, very, very intricate figure where it had a lot of action to it, which was very awesome. Okay, so now that actually calls for episode 3. There was only 2 Easter eggs in my eyes that I saw. If there was anything I missed, definitely do. I feel like there was a vehicle in there that I did not find or could not point out. So if you guys know of the water vehicle that that Man-at-Arms was driving, I don't remember that ever being in the toy line. It might be maybe just made for this cartoon, just like the other vehicle I mentioned earlier, the War Sled. So maybe it's just like the War Sled and it was made just for this episode. But with that being said, let's move on to episode 4 Easter eggs. Okay, so episode 4 Easter eggs. Well, first off, the episode's called The Most Dangerous Man in Eternia, and we do have 5 Easter eggs in this one. This, of course, is when he's helping, he's still trying to help sorcerers by getting to the location that they need to get the first sword. And the first sword is guarded by a mysterious creature. Now, before we get into the creature, I already knew what was going to happen based on the chant that Orko says that has Scareglow's name in it. And that's when we finally see Scareglow. Now, a lot of people are going to think this is Skeletor in some way. No. If you look here, this is the original Scareglow figure, and it actually was a glow-in-the-dark figure. Alright? And if you remember in this episode, he actually says to Teela that her revelation begins, which name drop that pretty much shows what her revelation was to seek out Prince Adam and bring order to magic. So, with that being said, we then find something that happened, and I might show it. First off, Teela finds Preternia. Now, of course, the doors open to Preternia, which looks a lot like Eternia. Now, the reason I bring this up is I'm going to show you a picture of the Eternia playset. I did not own the Eternia playset. It cost way too much. It was huge. If you think Castle Grayskull, the playset was huge, Eternia was even bigger. And they turned Eternia, the playset, into Preternia. And that's pretty awesome. But then all of a sudden, I love this series, But I'm really mad at Kevin Smith because he killed off Orko. I don't know if I'm going to go ahead and place the video because I look like a wreck, but I cried when it happened. I teared up. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to admit to my fate. I teared up. You know what? Screw it. Here's my fate. Here's me crying and looking like a mess after Orko died. I swear to God, Kevin Smith, if what I'm saying right here is true, and you killed off Orko in this series, I'm mad at you. Even though so far the series has been great. You killing off Orko was the worst thing ever. I had to get my reaction and put it on video, because only time I got a little bit emotional was because of this part, and I look like crap right now, and I was going to do like a shower before I got my review and everything, and now I'm going to have to edit this. But you killed off Orko. If I swear to God, if this is true, and you've killed off Orko, there you go, guys. You got to see me as a mess. Orko died. It frustrated me. It made me mad. And so, yeah, let's move on. Now, that was actually episode 4 Easter eggs. Episode 5 was chopped full of Easter eggs, but stuff that you might not have understood if you only watched the original line and only played the original action figures, but never deep dived into He-Man and Master Universe lore or anything in general, and I'll explain. Okay, so for the first Easter egg, we see a tiger, purple tiger-like character. I'm thinking this is another version of Panther, because we never got Panther in the episode, which is, again, is Skeletor's pet or mount that he rides. So this is, I think, what they're showing as the version of Panther. And, of course, as they chase down the Panther, they're chasing them down in the actual sky sleds I talked about earlier. Remember, they talked about the war sleds, and we kind of see, we saw earlier Man-at-Arms in the sky sleds. Well, this is actually the original sky sled you see right here. Now, of course, that was hard for me to get a shot because they're going by so fast. So this is the best shot I was able to get. Now we have the hover disc that Prince Adam brings up to Teela, saying, do you remember these? And I'm going to show you a clip here, because these are actually a deep cut to the original He-Man's and the Master Universe, or Masters of the Universe movie that happened in the 80s. There's a point where He-Man, played by Dolph Lundgren, is actually taking down some bad guys on these hover discs. And I don't remember hover discs being in the original cartoon. I'm pretty sure they weren't. So this is definitely an Easter egg to that. And that also brings me to what I'm about to talk about. I feel like what Kevin Smith is doing here is the multiverse to He-Man and the Master Universe, because this is bringing, what you're about to hear is from characters from the old cartoon and then deep cuts to prototypes. Okay, remember when I said episode 1, episode 5 had a deep cut Easter eggs or deep cut, information? That's what we're about to get into. For example, Hero is an unreleased prototype action figure that was actually an ancestor to He-Man that was later turned into a character for the 2002 cartoon. And this became something ongoing, because then we finally see, which of course you can see the Hero figure, but then we see Vicar Vicoria, which was also the original concept art for He-Man that was later turned into Vicar for the cartoon. And you'll see this is actually more of a barbarian-esque figure that was supposed to, or a concept art that was supposed to be He-Man, but it definitely changed. But again, there were so many changes. Keep in mind that He-Man was supposed to always have brown hair, but then eventually was changed with blonde hair. Why? Not sure, but we're going to also get into that in just a little bit. But first, I want to go into the other character, which is Codec Ungol. That is the sorceress character. That was actually the original, was once the sorceress of Castle Grayskull. And then, of course, Teela Na was the one that ended up becoming the sorceress we know and love. So, it's very, very odd the way they're taking prototypes and different characters that didn't get their own world in this. So, And that actually brings it up to the next one I'm going to talk about. And this is a full screen picture here of Wonder, Vicar Victoria, and Kuduk Ungol. Again, Vicar Victoria was the original concept art for He-Man. But then they made a prototype figure, and that figure is Wondar, okay? The original figure was actually called a Savage He-Man. But then later on, as they made more of the classic figures around 2000, then they made the figure called Wondar, as you see here with complete articulation. But then there was the Savage He-Man that I showed before that is actually the original Wondar. I know I'm probably breaking your head, but you got to think they make concept art and figures and then they don't go to release, or they change it by changing color. For example, He-Man from brown hair to blonde hair. So, man, the deep cuts they did in here. And then finally we have King Grayskull. Now, you'll see King Grayskull. Well, first off, King Grayskull was a concept figure they made a long time ago to look like Castle Grayskull, which I'll show you right here. It's a figure that's supposed to look like Castle Grayskull. Then they ended up changing it and making it look like more of a more heroic version of He-Man. They never turned it, this one into a figure, but they put it in the 2002 series. And eventually, I think they did make a figure down the road. But keep in mind, he's a descendant of Prince Adam, but they changed him for the cartoon. I'm not going to get into what they changed to, but you can clearly see in comparison. And of course, King Grayskull is riding on top of a Bionatops. I can never pronounce this. And this is the original character from the toy line of dinosaurs that they made back then. Now, the raptor you saw in this episode, they did not make a figure that I know about for that figure, but they did make other ones like a pterodactyl, so on and so forth. Alright, so with that being said, those are the Easter eggs in my review. My typical conversation of why I love this series so much. And, you know, deep-rooted, I'm tired. I've been doing this for hours now. But there were so many Easter eggs to characters, action figures, deep cuts, prototypes, comic books, cartoons, everything. Everything was connected in so much ways. I love what Kevin Smith did. I can't wait to watch the behind the scenes feature, so I would suggest watching it as well. It might even touch upon some stuff I'm talking about right now, and he might even touch upon some stuff that might be for upcoming. But again, 9 out of 10. I loved it. I'm so happy what they did here. I can't wait to see part 2. And of course, you know, at the end here, we did find out that Skeletor now is the master of the universe and has the sword. The ending is amazing, guys. But I want to thank you all for watching. Again, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new here. And as always, I am Putty Man with GamerPods. Thank you for watching my review. Thank you for checking out the Easter eggs. If you sat through this whole video, you are a legend OG. Thank you. And for that, I want you to type in the comments below, I have the power. Again, I have the power. If you made it through all the way to this video, and I will know you did just by you typing I have the power. But again, I appreciate it. And as always, I'm Putty Man with GamerPods. And do not forget, roll out high score. Peace out. I'll talk to you all later.